Hello.
Hello?
Yes, hello. Oh, whoops. Hello. Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Oh, I didn't turn on the video.
Okay. Was I late? I'm so sorry. Oh, there you are. Hi.
No, hey, how are you? Hey, how are
Hi.
you?
You know, I haven't used Skype in a while, so when I turned it on, it said, we have a new version you need to install. So that's why I wasn't there right when you called.
Oh, okay. That's fine. We were watching. I was introducing you and showing them some of your website and some of your intro videos and so forth.
Thank you.
Hey, where are you located exactly? You're
Okay.
in California.
Right, I'm in what's called the San Fernando Valley. It's called Sherman Oaks, and most people are familiar with Universal Studios, so I'm about 10 minutes away from Universal Studios.
All right. So why don't we? So let me show you who you're talking to a little bit here, as best I can. It's just a group of
Hi.
I don't know 20,
Hi.
25.
25 lucky people to have you as their doctor. Wow.
So this is why I had her.
No, but seriously, I mean, because you're so humble, do they know you're like a superstar? I mean, even if all you were Dr. Campbell's son, that would be enough. But I mean, you're the co-author of the greatest plant-based book of all time, and I mean, do they know how lucky they are?
This is about you, Chef.
Okay,
AJ.
but I mean, I'm honored. I mean, they just I mean, it's worth moving to Rochester for.
I don't think you'd be happy come about 6 months from now, 7 months from now.
True.
So thanks for taking the time, Chef AJ. I really appreciate that. I did a little bit of an introduction about you doing this for 40 years. You've been plant-based for 40 years. Can you tell us, 40 years ago, it was harder to do this. I mean, there were in some ways. I mean, there's far less products, which we don't much of anyway. But why did you do it?
Well, yeah, why did I do it? And, if I had done it correctly, Dr. Campbell, it would have been easier. But what I was what they call a junk food vegan or a vegetarian. So I did it at first purely for ethical reasons. I was 17 years old when I matriculated to the University of Pennsylvania on September 1st, 1977. I was 17 years old, and I was working for a veterinarian. It was part of my work-study scholarship because that was my dream, was to be a veterinarian. Well, the very first day at Penn, he handed me a tank of live salamanders, and he said, I need you to cut their heads off. And I'm like, why? Now realize I'm already squeamish. I was raised Jewish, so we were kosher. We didn't eat a lot of animals. I mean, we didn't eat I never ate like a lobster or, I'm like, why? He goes, well, I'm doing protein lens regeneration experiments in the amphibian, and I just need the eye. And I didn't want to do it, but I mean, I'm on scholarship, a guy in a white coat. I cut the head off one salamander. I puked my guts off. I went to the student health and I said, God, I will never eat, wear, or harm any of your animals again. So I became an ethical vegan, which was great, except you weren't even born in 1977. China Study hadn't been written. Neil Barnard and PCRM weren't around, nor was the internet. And so I did everything wrong. I took out the animal products, which were great for my health, but I didn't put in the foods that I recommend today: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. All I ate was processed food. Now, you're right, they didn't have the same kind of processed vegan junk food in 1977, like Daiya cheese and Gardein meat and soy burgers. They didn't even have plant milk in a box or powdered soy milk. So what did I eat? Candies, cakes, cookies, pies, and ice cream. Lots of things are vegan. Coca-Cola's vegan. Twizzlers are vegan. Potato chips are vegan. So that's what I ate. And because I was young, I didn't get sick from it right away, but I did get pretty fat, and I was almost 200 pounds by the time I was 20 years old, and I'm only 5'6", and that's more than 80 pounds than I weigh now. So aside from the fact that it made me quite overweight, I didn't get cardiovascular disease or diabetes or cancer or anything like that, even though everyone in my family had either died or was afflicted with those conditions. But when I was 43 years old, I woke up bleeding profusely. And when I used the restroom, and it turned out I had what they call precancerous polyps. And the doctor said that these are the kind of polyps that, if not removed, always turn into colon cancer. And my colon was riddled with them. And I didn't understand why, because I wasn't eating any dairy or any meat, but I was just eating junk food: oil, salt, sugar, flour. I wasn't drinking alcohol, lots of caffeine. I wasn't eating any food. I wasn't eating any fruits and vegetables. And so, of course, why wouldn't I get sick? I was lucky that I, made it to 43. And so it was then that I went to a place called the Optimum not Optimum Health Institute, Optimum Health Institute. That's what True North is. That's the Optimum Health Institute. But I went to the Optimum Health Institute in San Diego, California, where for the very first time, no one had ever told me that what we eat has anything to do with our health. I was taught, my parents always said, we lose legs from diabetes. It's the vagaries of old age. That's what we heard. Oh, it's genetic. This is what I heard. So I just assumed that when you get to a certain age in my family, you inject insulin in your belly and you maybe go blind or lose your leg. That's just the lot we have in life. Or you get obese like my mother, or you get your chest cracked open like my father and grandfather. And, this is what I just figured was the normal course of aging. But at the Optimum Health Institute, I was taught by doctors and nurses that what we eat actually has a profound effect on our health, probably the most profound of any other thing that is within our control. And that, like your dad said, or you said in the China study, the genetics, it loads the gun, but your diet is what pulls the trigger. And there was about 300 people at this center every week, and they would come in on Fridays and give testimonials how eating, now the diet at Optimum Health isn't the one that I would recommend today. It was raw. And I don't think the fact that it was uncooked vegan is what healed me. It was because it was unprocessed and it was missing all the things that I don't recommend, like sugar and oil and flour and salt. And it was fruits and vegetables. So I think I could have healed just as quickly as, on a McDougall type style diet. But people would come in every Friday and give testimonials how that when they adopted this diet, they were cured of lupus, of AIDS, of brain cancer, of Lyme disease, of things that we're taught are incurable or very difficult to cure. And I thought, well, mine's not even full-blown cancer. Mine's what they're calling precancer. So this will be easy. And so I followed the diet. I did some spiritual things. I meditated, things like that, which I think are important, but I don't think they're necessarily necessary for everyone. I did them because they felt right to me. And within 6 months, I went back to the gastroenterologist to have a repeat sigmoidoscopy. They wouldn't even do a colonoscopy at the HMO I had at the time. And he said, they took pictures at the first one, by the way. They had a camera where they could see the size of every polyp and the location on the GI tract. And it was the same GI doctor. And he said, where did you go for surgery? I go, I didn't go for surgery. I go, I'm afraid of surgery. He goes, well, your polyps are all gone. Your colon is clear and clean and vascular like a newborn baby. So explain to me how this happened within 6 months. I said, well, I changed my diet. He goes, oh, that's impossible. And so when he left the room, the assisting GI doctor, who I think was from the country of India, because she was, her skin and her voice reminded me of somebody that might be from India, she goes, I believe you. And right then, my life changed. And I took a leave of absence from my job. I was an activity director working with seniors. I went to culinary school, and I became Chef AJ. So, what we eat is so important to our health. Genetics is what gives me green and brown eyes and things like that. But it's not our destiny. Our genes are not our destiny.
And so, when you changed your diet from there, you basically just cut out the processed foods.
So at first, what I did was just I was doing it raw because that's what they taught. So it was really mostly fruits and vegetables, but they did include things like seeds and avocados. And now that what I know from Dr. McDougall about starch and how important it is to satiety and feeling full, I might have done things differently. But the truth is my diet was so bad because while I tell people to eat from the 4 food groups of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, I had my own 4 food groups: candies, cakes, cookies, and ice cream. And so I was basically just eating flour and sugar and, caffeine. I was drinking Coke Slurpees. And so any change I made, not that I would ever recommend paleo or keto, but what I'm saying is when your diet is basically dessert 3 meals a day for, 43 years, any change you make is good. But the thing was I wasn't eating fruits and vegetables. And so just starting to eat those, that I believe is what, began to heal me, all the micronutrients and phytochemicals that I wasn't getting from eating a completely nutritionally bereft diet. And so, of course, their diet didn't have sugar, oil, flour, or salt, just like my diet doesn't today. But it was raw. And I don't want to, completely bash the raw diet because it's so much better than the standard American diet. But I find it's not as satisfying as adding the cooked whole grains, legumes, potatoes, and sweet potatoes. It doesn't, first of all, you're freezing all the time because nothing you eat is cooked. But the thing is sometimes when you have an extreme condition, extreme measures are needed, and that's where I went in time. I didn't know about True North or Dr. McDougall at the time. So that's what I did, and it was great because the truth is it really taught me to eat fruits and vegetables. I think about maybe if I had gone right into a McDougall-style diet, I might not have learned to eat fruits and vegetables because that seems to be, well, fruit's pretty easy for most people like fruit, but it's pretty hard to get people to eat vegetables. And if that's all you're getting, you're going to learn to eat them, you're going to learn to like them, which I did.
And so, after the culinary education, how did you apply that to the new diet?
Yeah, so I actually took a step backwards, believe it or not, because the culinary school, to my knowledge, there's no at least brick and mortar culinary schools that teach the way we eat. Maybe they have online programs now, but they teach. There's an old saying in the restaurant business: "No salt, no sale." And in culinary school, because many chefs are trying to become restaurant chefs, you use more sugar, fat, and salt in culinary school than you would like if you were at home. So where I went, it was a high-end raw culinary school, and the food was delicious, but a lot of agave had just hit the scene, and we were taught that it was better than sugar, which really it's probably worse, or if not just as bad. We were using coconut oil, things like that. And so I sort of took a little bit of a step backwards, not necessarily in my health, but in my progression to the healthiest diet, because I rationalize, well, if it's this kind of oil, it's okay. If it's this kind of sugar, it's okay. Low glycemic, words that we hear when we're trying to do a triumph of marketing over science. And plus, it didn't help that I got a job as a pastry chef at a restaurant. So that kind of, I don't want to say it set me back for 5 years, because the truth is I still had learned to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, which I wasn't doing before. And I did cut out the white sugar and the white flour. So I stopped the Slurpees. Oh my God, I was drinking a Coke Slurpee for breakfast every day of my life until July 6, 2003. So I stopped the Coke Slurpees. It was slop. I stopped the Dr. Pepper. So I was improving my diet. And then, thanks to a colleague of ours now, but primarily your dad's, I'm in the summer of 2008. I had heard Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn speak for the first time. And it actually I had never heard of him until then. And it was on a DVD I had bought on the internet. He had given a lecture at VegSource. And some of the plant-based doctors are, well, I'm like this too, I'm accused of, are kind of like, shoving it down and like, you got to do this, you got to do this. But he was so laid back and so charming and so handsome, and he just kind of like your dad, exactly, using phrases like, well, we're tall puppies in the grass. And he made a very compelling case to not eat sugar, oil, salt, and especially oil for health reasons. And when I watched that video, it was like, oh, everybody in my family died from heart disease. I don't have it now, but I don't want it. So I'm going to not cook with oil. And it wasn't hard, especially because I had culinary training. And of sugar, oil, and salt, oil is actually the easiest. So that propelled me to the next level. And then, of course, things, you just meet more and more people like your dad and Dr. Goldhammer, where you just, like a sponge, you absorb it all until one day your diet is just it's just like, well, for me, it's an A+, but again, it's mine. I don't think everybody has to have an A+. But what people may not know about me, unless they know my story, is that I was am in recovery, a food addict. And that's somebody that can't moderate the use of certain foods, specifically processed foods like sugar, flour, and alcohol. I never had a problem with alcohol, but I put alcohol in the same category because it's basically just another form of sugar. And so for me, it's easier to...
I'm sorry, is that something that you realized from an earlier age, or was it when you started cutting things out?
I didn't know. You know what? It's funny because I'm sure you look in medical literature, and now you can see articles with food addiction, but they never mentioned it. I mean, it wasn't mentioned in the 60s, 70s. It's like a recent thing. I mean, it's always existed, but it never had a name before. I didn't realize that I was an addict, or people don't like that word, or somebody that struggled with certain foods until I think it was the fall of either 2011, 2012. It was when a movie called Flight with Denzel Washington was released. He was nominated for an Oscar. Should have won, but he was up against Daniel Day-Lewis, who played Lincoln, so they were both great. So I watched this movie because I love movies, and it was a movie about his he was an addict, a drug addict and an alcoholic. And it was a movie about addiction. And so I was watching this. It wasn't really much about flying. There was one scene on an airplane. But other than that, it was about his course as an addict. And I'm watching this movie, and I don't didn't know anybody really well that was alcoholic or drug addict. A few people, not close. So it's not something that was ever in my world. And I'm watching this movie, and I'm watching his behavior and his denial, and I'm watching this one scene that took place in a hotel room where he needed to be sober for the testimony. So they had guards guarding him, but for some reason the hotel room that was adjacent was unlocked, and he went because they cleaned his mini bar, and he went in there, and there was like another mini bar. So he takes a miniature bottle of alcohol, and he unscrews the top. And then you see him putting it down. And then there's this close-up of his hand going like this. And it was like, it sent chills down my spine. Because that reminded me of my behavior with dessert. Like, I would hide it in the freezer. And then I would open the freezer. And I'm not going to... And it just... For some reason, that movie resonated with me. And then I started Googling food addiction. And at the time, there was certainly nobody in the plant-based world talking about it. Nobody. And a lot of the people in the plant-based world, I know you believe in it. I know that Dr. Scott Stoll believes in it. I know that Dr. Furman believes in it. And I know that Dr. Barnard believes in it. But a lot of the other doctors either said flat out they didn't believe in it, or they said, look, it's not my area of expertise. I don't know. So in 2012, the only treatment I could get for it, and when I say treatment, I don't mean inpatient, I meant outpatient, was with people in the non-plant-based world who treat it with abstinence of things like sugar, flour, and alcohol, but with a strict weighing and measuring program. And I knew that that was not for me, that I am not the kind of person that's going to bring a food scale to a restaurant or weigh it. I mean, that's what's so beautiful about what you teach, what I teach about calorie density, is as long as we're eating the right food, we don't have to weigh and measure our food. We can eat what we want as long as we're eating the right food. So that's when I started to look into it and started interviewing people of this world and realized it really was a thing, that there are people that vary in their vulnerability to these processed foods. So, for example, nobody gets addicted to wheat berries, but there are people who are very sensitive to wheat and flour. And that when you hear things like, bet you can't eat just one, some of us are in that category. There's people, I'm pretty sure you're not a food addict. I've met pretty much everybody in your family, and I'm pretty sure that I could give you a jar of peanuts and you could probably eat a few and maybe not eat the whole jar. But there's people like me that when we're given these high-fat, high-calorie, highly processed, hyper-palatable foods, we can't stop, and people are now recognizing that it's a real thing, and that we're not lazy or weak-willed or lack willpower. That these compounds that are, when you process sugar and flour, like for instance, we don't have this problem with beets and we don't have this problem with barley, but when you process the plants into these powders like sugar and flour, our brains light up like Las Vegas, and we just can't stop eating them. And so once I knew that, I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel ashamed. I felt empowered because it explained the first 43 years of my life, that there wasn't really anything wrong with me.
And so you've mentioned flour a couple times, and I'm curious to know why flour, because flour is part of what we talk about.
Right.
So what's been your experience with flour, and what have you learned?
So again, one of the things about food addiction or refined food addiction, it's not a one-size-fits-all, it's a one-size-fits-most. So people are going to vary in their vulnerability. So for example, there might be some people that can eat some whole grain flour or Ezekiel bread. But for some of us, it's when you process whole grains into flour or beets into sugar, they go through a very similar refining process as drugs and alcohol. And so the end game, what you're left with, are these more drug-like than food-like to people that are vulnerable or susceptible. Not everybody is. That's the thing. And so how do you know? I tell people, you do, for bread, for example, if you can have a loaf of the best bread, I don't know, people like that Dave's Killer Bread. If you can get a loaf of that bread in your house and eat a piece and then not think about it for another week, you might be somebody that can have a little bread or flour or pasta. But if you're somebody that if you take a sourdough baguette and got to eat the whole thing, you may be somebody that can't moderate that. So what's interesting, and this is where I had to go outside the plant-based world to some of the PhDs that were writing about this, is people did believe that sugar wasn't a health food, and that for many people it was more addictive than even, say, cocaine or heroin. But nobody could believe that bread, which is the staff of life, or pasta, could have these same psychogenic properties. And again, it's not for everybody, and as Dr. Clapper often says, the poison is in the dose. But think about it, even in terms of caloric density, flour is 1,500 calories a pound. Whole grains are 500 calories per pound. You're always, whether you have food addiction, whether you have diabetes or obesity, you're always going to do better eating the whole food, both in terms of caloric density and just in health benefits.
So how did you get out? How do you recommend that people get out of that cycle in general? That food addiction cycle, because here in Rochester, for example, I've met some folks there's a food addicts. You guys are familiar with this? There's a food addicts group, and it's sort of what you described. It's almost like an Alcoholics Anonymous type model with a sponsor, and you're reporting every day about what you're going to eat and this type of thing. What do you recommend?
So, not to be self-promoting, I recommend you read my book because I put, only because this is a book about food addiction, and I put, it took me about 6 years to write it, and I wanted to make sure that I was really well into recovery before releasing it, and it was endorsed by both Dr. Campbell's, just so you know. But I recommend that they do get support. Now, I don't have any problem with 12-step programs unless you are somebody that wants to be vegan and they're telling you can't, because there are some food addiction recovery programs that will tell you without animal products you can't recover, and that's absolutely not true. I run a program called the Ultimate Weight Loss Program. We have many people that have recovered from food addiction or are recovering without animal products. A lot of these programs, though, give a specific food plan that makes you have oil, whether you want it or not. And see, I can't do the weighing and measuring. I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think it's natural. But I think having the support of whether it's a mentor or a sponsor, if you want to call it, or even a buddy, I think that's huge. But like any problem, the first step is to acknowledge it and to understand it. And I think that is a tremendous help. Dr. Barnard had a video on the internet. It's still there for years. It's called How to Magnetize a Baby. It's on YouTube, where he talks about how sugar and chocolate and cheese and meat are the most addictive foods. And so he knew this stuff for a long time. He has a book about it, actually, called Breaking the Food Seduction. But I think if you feel that you're somebody, whether you want to use the word addicted or just somebody who has a problem moderating the use of certain foods, the only thing that really works for that is abstinence, is giving it up completely, unfortunately. Moderation, first of all, rarely works in general, and it never works for conditions like obesity or diabetes, or especially for food addiction. So cleaning up the environment is going to be a big step.
And what about folks going out to eat? Restaurant food.
Yeah, I have a chapter on that, actually. That is more difficult, honestly, because the truth is in these food recovery programs, even though I've never been in one, I get a lot of private clients. They actually tell the participant not to eat at other people's homes or restaurants for 90 days, because the thing is it's much more difficult, because as I mentioned earlier, restaurants use more sugar, oil, and salt than you ever will at home. And even if you can get a compliant meal, and I believe there's some restaurants you can, not many, but some, you're going to be so tempted, because while I could be perfectly satisfied, like last night we were out of town, so I had a very simple dinner. I had a salad with some quinoa and a delicious dressing, not a 5-star meal, but it was very satisfying. I might be able to get that at a restaurant, but it's hard for me to enjoy it while everybody else is eating pizza and lasagna and cheesecake and chocolate cake. So if our environment predicts our success, which I believe it does, restaurant eating can be problematic, especially when somebody's early in their recovery. So what I recommend for people that go to restaurants is go with a full belly. Go eat a potato or a sweet potato first, so that you've got that hunger dialed down. So first of all, that you're not starving, that you have to eat the bread bowl and then eat the butter bowl. So don't go hungry. Call in advance. Unless it's some kind of emergency, most people know if they're going out to dinner. So they can look up the menu in advance if it's online, and if they can't, they can certainly call the restaurant, and they can say, listen, I'm on a very special, you want to call during non-peak hours. You don't want to call the restaurant 7 o'clock on a Saturday night and say, accommodate me. But you call them like after lunch and before dinner. There's a lull in the restaurant business from like 2 to 4 where the staff is usually having their lunch, and you say, I don't mean to be difficult. I've heard some great things about your restaurant, but I'm on a very special diet, doctor's orders. Can you accommodate me? And then they'll say, well, what is your situation? And then I would say something like, well, I can eat any vegetable, any fruit, any whole grain, potato or legume. I just can't have any oil, salt, or sugar. And some people even carry little business cards. And either they'll say no or they'll say no problem. And so there are ways to navigate the restaurant. But see, here's the thing. If you're somebody like me that eats in accordance with the principles of calorie density truly, you're going to need a lot more food to feel satisfied than if you're eating oil and flour. And I can't get enough food. Unless it's a salad bar restaurant, I'm never full at a restaurant because I need more food than the restaurant will give me. I'd have to order probably several entrees. So as I got further in my recovery and lost weight, restaurants had a lot less appeal to me.
And tell me about your weight journey, if you don't mind.
So my weight journey, no, I have a friend, Heather, who lost 300 pounds in my program. And she said the only time I was at my ideal weight is when I was born. And so that was one time I was at my ideal weight. But, a lot of times people say, well, you weren't that fat because my highest weight was 180. But that's obese. And I was 160 at the age of 11. Now, at the age of 11, I wasn't 5 feet tall. That is obese. And in 1970, when there was only one fat kid in a class of 40, that was me. So I became fat at the age of 5, and I pretty much stayed overweight or obese until I was 52 years old, 6 years ago, when I started the Ultimate Weight Loss Program. And honestly, I weigh 117 now. I don't struggle. I eat so much delicious food. I literally eat pounds of potatoes for lunch. I had 2 pounds of French fries for lunch, made in the air fryer, crisp, delicious hot fries, cups of rice, huge salads, fruit, ice cream made out of fruit. This is not deprivation. This isn't suffering. I eat more food and more delicious food now as a slender person than I ever did when I was overweight or obese. It's just I eat differently. And, you have to go through a period of adjustment. If you're eating a high fat, high salt, high sugar diet, this food is not going to taste good right away. It could take 30 days to neuroadapt. Some people, it could take months. But if you can get through that hump, this food will taste amazing. I don't know if you can hear that beep, but that's my red lentil chili that I'm going to have for dinner.
Did you have some bumps along the way in terms of your...
No, I just took one class and I succeeded. Absolutely. So that's what my whole book is about. I had tremendous bumps. I suffered from anorexia for about 6 years in my teens and was hospitalized many times. And then, after anorexia, which isn't sustainable for weight loss or health, I became bulimic, which in some ways was worse. I went through a period in my 30s taking fen-phen, first via prescription, but then when the FDA took it off the market, taking it illegally, anything to lower my weight, exercising incessantly and blowing out my knees, smoking cigarettes, doing anything I could to try to maintain a low weight. And then finally I, gave up. But when I say gave up, I didn't, it just happened that I was very lucky that I went to True North in 2011 for an unrelated condition. I wasn't going because I was fat. I was, but that's not why I was there. I was there because I was on psychiatric medicine and I didn't want to be on it. It was given to me after my baby died, actually four miscarriages in a row, and I just didn't want to be on these drugs. They had side effects and I couldn't get off of them. And when I was there, I met Dr. Lyle and Dr. Goldhammer, who were the co-authors of the wonderful book, The Pleasure Trap. And I learned this stuff and it was like my mind was blown. And really, I don't want to say that doing this is easy, but it's pretty simple. I mean, you get to eat all the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes you want. And that's, and get a little bit of sunshine, a little bit of exercise. It's simple, but it's not always easy. And I think the thing that makes it most difficult is our friends and family. I really do. I used to attend a church where the minister, who was named O.C. Smith, he was known for a song called God Didn't Make Little Green Apples. Very famous man. And he became a minister. And he used to tell a story about when fishermen would catch crabs in a bucket. The crabs were alive, and they would put them in the bucket while they were fishing for more crabs. And every now and then, a crab would be smart enough to figure out that if he would crawl on the other crabs, he could get out the bucket and save his own life. But invariably, the other crabs would pull him down to his certain death. And the minister would say, that's your friends and family. And I kind of believe that when it comes to dietary and lifestyle change, because, misery loves company. And if you get well, if you get slender, if you've been overweight and all your friends are overweight, and if you get healthy and all your friends and family are sick, there becomes a shift in status. And people you would think that they would encourage you and be happy for you, but that's not a lot of people's experience. So a lot of times, they actually not only don't support the loved one in recovery, but they sabotage them. And I think it's the social aspect of changing your diet and changing your lifestyle that is probably the hardest, because we can lock people up at a place like True North and give them nothing but water for up to 40 days and fast them so that they'll like the food. Actually, in a few days of fasting, they'll like the food, or just feed them the food. And they'll reverse their diabetes and autoimmune disease and heart disease and like the food and lose weight. But they get back in their home environment, and even if they can keep their home clean from the crap food, most people have jobs, and most jobs have break rooms, and parents that are parents of kids, they go to soccer games and they bring in Krispy Kreme donuts, and you go to the pet store and they sell, I don't know why they sell M&Ms at the register, because last time I checked, dogs don't eat them. Same thing with the hardware store. So the environment, it's what is difficult is the environment. If you read The Pleasure Trap, which I'm sure you have, our brain was designed for an environment of scarcity. We weren't meant to solve this problem of junk food everywhere, insidious television. You can't. If you go to a movie, it drives me crazy. Everybody's eating, and it's like, why are we eating? It's a movie. You already had lunch. You already had dinner. What do you got to be eating? If they don't serve the concession, they don't make money. They don't make much money on the film. I don't understand why they have to do it, but it's hard. When I've had clients from other countries like France or Japan, they tell me that when they have business meetings, they have meetings. But here in the United States, you don't do anything, whether it's a funeral or there's food everywhere. You can't even have like a 10-minute corporate meeting without there being, croissant and donuts. It's such a whole different culture than some of the other countries. And we eat so much processed food in this country, something like 67 to 72% of our calories. And then, of course, another 20 or 30% from animal products. That we're just not eating fruits and vegetables. That's why I got my shirt on that says plant powered. People just don't, processed food. It's affordable. It's socially acceptable. It's readily available. It's so cheap that that's become our default, is processed food, and it's not food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that certainly resonates with me. I think the social thing, the logic and the activity of what we're trying to do is we can know what to do, but doing it is more difficult in the environment we're in. And it keeps pulling us back sometimes, I think, to that struggle. So what's the answer? To become Spartan?
Just to become, well, the answer is to become a monk. No, there's, again, this is where if you go to Dr. Lyle's website, and he would be a great one for you to interview, and I'm sure he would do it. He's a doll. His website is esteemdynamics.com, and he has these free videos on him, and one of them is called Getting Along Without Going Along, which gives you tips and tricks how to get along with people that may be contrary by using things called the SEAM strategy, like, if people are trying to be food bullies. Well, you know what? I'm in a pretty good groove right now. Seems to be working for me, things like that. But there's one called the perfect personality, and some people are going to have a harder time than others. So people like me and Dr. John McDougall or Dr. Goldhammer, we have what's known as pretty disagreeable personalities. You and your dad, you have and your mom, who I've met, have very agreeable personalities. So people that are lovely, kind, sweet people like you are going to have a little bit more difficult time resisting this social pressure. It doesn't mean it can't be done. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult. And so one of the things I tell people, there's going to be so much pressure everywhere you go. At least make your home a sanctuary. At least keep your home pristine. Keep all the junk food out of the house. So at least when you're home, you have no choice but to make the healthy choice. And then if you have some indiscretions when you're out, hopefully they won't derail you completely. But we got to keep our home environments clean. And I learned this from a brilliant man last November at the Remedy Conference named Dr. Thomas Campbell, who said if you have temptation anywhere in your environment, you will fail. And I do believe that to be true. So, my psychology hasn't changed. The reason I'm successful is because my environment has changed.
Great. Does anybody have any questions? Can you tell us about your support group, your weight loss?
So it's a program, and you join it. It's called the Ultimate Weight Loss Program. My website is eatunprocessed.com, and what it does is it comes with lots of audio and video content and a recipe guide, but the most important thing it comes with is support. So that support you were talking about in the 12-step program, while we don't do the 12-step model, it is an abstinence-based program, the absence of the sugar, the flour, and alcohol. But we have people now, we've been running this program now for 6 years in person and 4 years online. So we have people from all over the world at all different levels of their recovery. So we may have somebody that's just starting out that needs to lose 100 pounds, and we have somebody in the group that's already lost 300 pounds. And nobody's perfect, people relapse, but it's, when you see that today is Tuesday, so we do Transformation Tuesday where we post our photos of before and afters. But when you see that so many people are successful, it encourages you that you can be successful And like, let's say I'm asleep. Let's say somebody has a problem in the middle of the night. I'm sleeping. They're posting. Well, somebody in another part of the world is up that's going to be answering them. And that's what I do all day. I spend on my phone answering people's questions in this private group. And it's a lovely group. We even every September we meet in Las Vegas for the live Ultimate Weight Loss Conference, which I'm praying you'll speak at next year. Bring your whole family. We have Dr. Barnard this year because this would be right up your alley. And, so we do create that support at least annually. And a lot of people create their own little groups, just kind of like your brother Nelson does with the pods with Plant Pure. We do the same thing because we have this. Where are we from? So people in different areas like Sacramento, these are places I know that have created this, and Michigan, they'll have their own little support groups, and they'll meet much more frequently.
Right. And your book that you just came out with?
Yeah, I like it. It's called The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss. It's my second book. My first one is Unprocessed, and it really is very comprehensive. If somebody did not want to join my program, if they just read Chapter 3, they could do it themselves at home. I have a sister who is very introverted, and she's not tech savvy. She lost 50 pounds doing this program without pretty much any support. It's very comprehensive, the book, and you endorsed it, so hopefully you read it. And it's basically a combination of the principles of calorie density plus what I know about food addiction. And when you combine them, it's really a surefire way to lose weight and get healthy and reverse any chronic lifestyle diseases.
Great. I forgot my question. Anybody have any questions? What are the secrets? What do you recommend in terms of food? Are there specific things that you ask people to do?
Yeah.
To focus
so I do. And this is probably the one thing that a lot of people balk at it first. And then when they get it and they understand the scientific efficacy, it becomes one of their favorite things. And so this was something I discovered quite accident. I don't just ask people to eat vegetables. I ask them to eat them for breakfast and to eat them first. And as crazy as that sounds, people that struggle with food addiction and overeating generally don't eat a lot of vegetables. And if you understand calorie density, the more calorically concentrated the food, the more dopamine is released, the more pleasure you get. So that's why we like oil at 4,000 calories a pound and peanut butter at 3,000 calories a pound and chocolate at 2,500 calories a pound, better than kale at 100 calories a pound. So once you eat something really delicious like potatoes, rice and beans, or sweet potatoes at 400, 500, 600 calories a pound, it's pretty hard to go back and eat your salad or eat your vegetables. So if you eat foods in order of increasing caloric density, you tend to enjoy them more because when you're hungry, you actually will enjoy vegetables. You're not going to eat a hot fudge sundae and then enjoy an apple. You're not going to eat a huge baked potato and then go back and eat some steamed kale. But you can do it the other way. But what I found out by accident was that there is a compound in vegetables, especially green vegetables, called thylakoids. And these literally fight food cravings, particularly for sugar, and turn off the hunger switch. And that's why if you eat vegetables first at every meal, whether it's some steamed greens, like Dr. Esselstyn recommends to his heart patients, a salad, maybe a soup, like a hot soup or a cold gazpacho that's just vegetables without starch, these can help not only fill you up on fewer calories because of caloric density, but these compounds really are magical for fighting the cravings. And at first, everybody balks at it and says it's stupid and they're not going to do it. But once they do it and get into the groove, they learn to like it and they can't function without it. And I'm not telling people to just sit there and eat a bag of raw steamed kale. I've got lots of recipes in my book like balsamic Dijon glazed Brussels sprouts. And when you think a pound of vegetables is a lot, when you cook it in a manner like roasting or in an air fryer, a pound will fit in, it's like 2 cups. It's really nothing. Yes, if you eat it raw, it is. So that's one of the things I really recommend is sequencing the meals. Even if you don't want to eat vegetables for breakfast, sequence your meals. Eat the lower calorically dense foods first. Always make sure that half your plate is vegetables. In other countries other than the United States, vegetables appear at breakfast in almost every country that I've traveled to. When I was in Japan, like you, I used to be an entertainer. In Japan in 1992, my breakfast at a traditional hotel was miso soup with vegetables, rice, and salad. Not because I was vegan. That's because what they eat in Japan. In China, kimchi for breakfast. My friend is in the Netherlands right now, and even though they're eating herring, every breakfast is with lots of vegetables, tomatoes, cucumbers, onions. So the rest of the world eats vegetables as part of a healthy breakfast. It's only in the United States where breakfast is caffeine, flour, and sugar. So eat vegetables, eat vegetables, eat vegetables, but make sure you're eating adequate starch, because the starch is what's going to give you that nice feeling of fullness, the satiety, so that you won't end up binging on crap. So you need to find that perfect balance between veggies and starch, and then have your delicious fruit for dessert, and you can be very satisfied and very full on remarkably fewer calories.
And is there a technique for, after having that fantastic dinner, is there a technique for, the craving that comes at 9 p.m.
Yeah.
You're sitting there, it's like, oh, God, I need a little something more.
Yes. The cure is to watch Dr. Lyle's lecture called The Conditioned Cram, because he explained that what that was nothing more than classical conditioning, and you can break that. It's going to be uncomfortable for up to a few days, maybe even a week, but that's what it is. So it's a really cool thing he discovered called The Conditioned Cram. That lecture is available on my YouTube page. It's on Dr. McDougall's website. I can send you the links for your groups, but when they understand that what that is really classical conditioning, that they're experiencing these night cravings for specific foods, it still can be a few days of discomfort. Just like if anybody in your group has ever quit smoking, that's harder actually. It's uncomfortable, but it can be done. You have to distract yourself. You got to take a bubble bath, paint your nails, walk your dog, get on. If you're in my group, that's when you get on and you post. That can go away. But then what I tell people, if you're absolutely going to eat something outside of hunger, especially late at night, which is not preferable for sleep and GI stuff, is my motto is, if you're not hungry enough to eat vegetables, you're not hungry. So if you have to have a specific food, those are cravings. That's not true hunger.
And what about emotional eating? What about folks who have a rough day?
Yeah.
How do you
right?
answer this?
So again, I'm going to say that if you are a person that medicates with food, medicate with a sweet potato. That I don't mind if people eat outside of hunger, if they're eating what I call foods to the left of the red line. So the thing is a well-known food addiction specialist used to say, if hunger's not the problem, food isn't the solution. So we all have stress. We need to find ways to mitigate the stress instead of medicating the stress. And one of the best things a person can do for stress, believe it or not, is exercise first thing in the morning, because it does something where it just helps build up our resiliency for future stress. That doesn't mean we're not going to have stress. Go for a walk, run in place. Find ways, there's a list somewhere on the internet, 100 things you can do other than eat. Call a friend, go for a walk, go to a movie, but get a massage. There's ways you can dial down the stress, even if when it's really bad, other than eating. And also make sure that you're not hungry, because eat regular. I don't know if you have to eat by the clock necessarily, but when you get too hungry, it's too easy to make the wrong decision. So I am a big believer in always having healthy food with you. I always carry cooked potatoes or sweet potatoes with me. If you want to medicate with food, but make sure it's potatoes, rice, beans, broccoli, fruit, that kind of thing, and you'll still be okay.
And what are your favorite go-to foods? Do you have any practical?
Absolutely. So one of our favorite meals, and by the way, I think if somebody's really serious about eating healthfully long term, they might want to invest in at least one item called the Instant Pot electric pressure cooker. And you can go to my YouTube channel or just Google Chef AJ, or my television show Healthy Living with Chef AJ, 13 episodes where I use the Instant Pot, because you can get dinner on the table really, really quickly, and healthy dinners very quickly. So, and if you use my name AJ on the website, instantpot.com, the company will give you $10 off. So that's one thing I use every night, making a soup, a stew, or like I said, tonight I'm doing red lentil chili. Tomorrow I know I'm going to make cauliflower bisque. But my favorite go-to easy meal, and believe it or not, we even serve this to company, is what I call the stuffed potato meal. And so you can do this with any kind of potato. You can do it with a sweet potato, a Yukon Gold, a russet. You cook the potato however you want. I like to roast them or cook them in my air fryer. You can cook them in your microwave or steam them. It doesn't matter. But you want to start out with a nice sized cooked potato or sweet potato. And then you put more stuff in it. So we like to put in corn or roasted corn and either pinto beans or black beans. And, when people say, oh, glycemic index of the potato, well, I don't just eat the potato. It's stuffed with corn and beans and maybe some steamed broccoli and maybe one of those like faux cheese sauces you make, or maybe some sauteed mushrooms and onions that I I can do without oil. And when I have people over, I create, instead of a salad bar, I create a potato bar where everybody gets the Costco has these potatoes about as big as footballs. And I have salsas, and I have barbecue sauce, and I have all kinds of vegetables and beans, and people love making their own customized potato, and it's never the same way twice. It's kind of the same idea you could do with a bowl. You can do this if you don't like potatoes for some reason, then put a grain on the bottom, put millet, quinoa, brown rice. It's delicious. If you go to episode 75 of Weight Loss Wednesday, I show you how to make one of my favorite things, which is called a poke bowl. They're very big in California. The idea is I don't use the fish, but the idea is to make sushi affordable. So instead of having it rolled, everything was in a bowl. So you take everything you would in sushi, some thinly sliced cucumbers and carrots and some mango and some brown rice, with some delicious sesame vinegar, things like that. And you can make these just delicious one bowl meals. Very easy. You can even use, microwaved organic brown rice. You don't have to be a chef to make food delicious, and especially the starch is so satisfying. And people have lived on potatoes for a year now, and more than one person has done it. So that's my go-to. Always do some batch cooking. Find at least a half a day on one of your days off. That's going to be the secret too, because if healthy food is the default, if you can make it so that it's easy to make the good choice and more difficult to make the bad choice, you'll be able to stay on course. So at least a half a day, one day a week, I'm batch cooking things like rice, beans, eating some, refrigerating some, freezing some, so that all I've got to do is pull things out of the freezer. There's always a meal. There's already cooked potatoes, sweet potatoes. And if the worst case scenario, like we were just in Las Vegas and our plane was delayed, we went to Wendy's and had a delicious baked potato.
Great. Does anybody have any questions? We have some Instapot. So I don't know if you remember a year or two ago, we had you for one of our events, and we did the Instant Pot. And so there's folks who are interested in the Instant Pot and have used it.
Nice.
Good effect. All right. Well, thank you, Chef AJ.
Well, thank you, Dr. Tom Campbell, and please come to our event in 2019 as our keynote speaker. It would be so wonderful to have you.
All right. Well,
consider.
Okay. I'll consider it.
Yes. Just write your demands, and we'll see what we can do. We'll have your parents, whatever it takes.
All right. Well, thanks a ton. I've always enjoyed, every conference that we've been at together.
Yes. Same. Likewise. Thank you so much, guys. Well, good luck. You are in the best hands. You guys are the luckiest people on the planet.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks. Good night, everyone. Bye.
Bye.